technological New Jerusalem. Emphasis on the technological. It's not really a very interesting conversation about things like people's superintelligence, people's AI takeoff, or massified proletarian effects in the wake of an AI takeoff, building a livable world as a result of these kinds of effects. If you're going to continue to bake into new systems the failings of existing systems, such as bourgeois cultural artifacts, such as religion and many others, or many other things that would tend to serve elitist ends, and say, well, why would you even say religion is this way? Well, that is its function. It's down enough so that you accept elitist and cruel institutions, harm yourself and others. And if you don't have to really examine a lot of white papers to figure this out, talk to a religious literalist, and they'll say something about the Lord. This is the language of a feudal serf. Why are you talking about the Lord? Well, this is just a kind of symptom of this problem. And this, you could say that there are some aspects of religious experience that are more cultural than religious literalist, and maybe less engaging with elitism. Surely it's a spectrum. But just imagining that it is a net positive when it's clearly operating in a different way is just derangement. It is itself a kind of liberal, quasi-religious belief that religious literalism somehow helps people by confusing them and making them more elitist, making them more accommodating to bourgeois things. This is the stand up for the abolition of private wealth. Change the subject. When this comes up, they often, left liberals often want something like a public health service. But like Bernie Sanders, they will become very upset if you start to become militant in service to getting the thing that they want. They think that somehow this will just happen by magic. And so they'll refer to things like a political revolution rather than an actual proletarian revolution. What is this political revolution? How is it brought about? These things have only come to pass historically by militancy, by eruption, by actions far beyond those that left liberals are willing to take. So these are people, Joseph Stalin referred to social democrats as objectively the left wing of fascism, and that's well in evidence when you look at the fates of people like Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg, who were killed by proto-fascists, but were sold out by social democrats who were colluding with those proto-fascists. And the people that they were killed by were not known as fascists at that time, but they had fascistic elements. And so when you have people who are unwilling to stand up for a communist is a person who's willing to fight for the abolition of private wealth, a humane and sustainable economic system, a humane and sustainable economic system, a necessary condition for a livable world, necessary condition for a livable world. You can't have a humane and sustainable world without a humane and sustainable economic system. But capitalistic sympathizers, not capitalists generally, a capitalist is somebody who owns a factory, something along those lines. There's a tremendous amount of financial capital at their disposal. the capitalist sympathizers will bend over backwards to obscure that point, that you cannot have a livable world without a humane and sustainable. You cannot have a livable world without a humane and sustainable economic system. So I was looking at some interesting articles recently to do with the um, do with the bubble, right? People are saying that we're concerned that the tech is facing an AI bubble, which is an absurd framing, utterly absurd framing. These big data center driven, centralized for profit. The you can pretty well understand that the open source LLM, it's quite intuitive. It works distributed across these things. It has greater potential for being useful to people, for being disruptive to systems than these data center controlled for profit abominations, these murderers of Earth. That's what a big tech AI is, really. So why are they doing this? Well, they are imperialists. They are creatures of the military-industrial complex. So they recognize the disruption of open source large language models and more massified generally. They recognize what that is. They recognize that they're on the wrong side of history with respect to that. They recognize that they could be leapfrogged quite quickly by this. But they also see that those effects are things that they can capitalize on. This massified phenomenon is something that they can capitalize on as it occurs. And by having these more centralized things at their disposal as well, it gives them a little more runway for staying ahead of the guillotine, of the dismantling of bourgeois institutions and government, of the building of a humane and sustainable world, which they're in favor of an omnicide. So when the money that they put into building these things, like the Stargate project, is just an absurdity that kind of got set aside. It was as a pretty direct response to the DeepSeek open source LLM phenomena, and the fact that this sort of thing is becoming centralized, massified. These for-profit LLMs, all of the services that they're providing, such as they are, could easily, with a fraction of the money being spent on these centralized forms, could be provided by open source forms, but that's not the agenda of the military-industrial complex. So these mega billion and trillion-dollar creatures of the military-industrial complex in the form of tech firms, they're playing by this set of bourgeois rules, which is to say they are killers of Earth. So when you say, is AI a bubble, and is that bubble about to pop? You're kind of ignoring the fact that the preferable thing, the vastly preferable thing, the proliferation of proletarian, open source, advanced computing and large language models, and the dismantling of these omnicidal abominations is what must happen. We're going to stop effects like the death of billions because of the capitalist climate apocalypse, the thing to which these people are overwhelmingly contributing. So it's not even a sensible framing. It's not even coherent. Like most things that technophiles are preoccupied with, it's not even at all coherent. Like technophiles are obsessed with the idea that an advanced computing takeoff, an intelligence explosion, the so-called AI singularity, will is an existential risk to humankind. It's not impossible that's the case, but the capitalist climate apocalypse killing everyone on Earth is almost everyone on Earth dies because of the capitalist climate apocalypse, which is the United States is overwhelmingly responsible for. Its U.S. military-industrial complex is the world's worst polluter. It protects all of the other super polluters, creating an inescapable regime of super pollution. And there's zero path to human survival without a multi-billion person loss of life, without the dismantling of the United States government. This is a thing distinct from other bourgeois government. It's 90% of the problem, whereas these others, see people, kind of social chauvinist type people, talking about Israel versus the United States. Israel's the worst thing that's ever happened to humankind. I understand the sentiment. They're extremely bad. But if Israel were to cease to exist tomorrow, the omnicide would still be going on. If the United States government, of which Israel is effectively just a part of, were to cease to exist tomorrow, humanity would have a fighting chance of survival or avoiding a multi-billion person loss of life because of runaway overheating from the capitalist climate apocalypse. Just to be clear, this is speculative. We've reached what decades ago was thought to be a century off still, 1.5 degrees of overheating. We're about 5 years away from 2 degrees of overheating. When we reach permanently 2 degrees of overheating, we'll have entered a phase of history that we can characterize as runaway overheating and cascading ecological collapses stemming from these kind of problems. And this is then a world where primate life forms like yourself can no longer live. It's just too goddamn hot. That's the path that we're on, pretty specifically because of inventions of the United States. The United States created these industries, the petrochemical industries, overwhelmingly. The livestock systems, which are by many studies, by certain studies, 51% of human contribution to the capitalist climate apocalypse. I don't think that's an accurate assessment in the way that I don't think it's accurate to say that petrochemicals are then 49%, right? Because without the military-industrial complex, neither of these would even be serious concerns. So these three things must be done away with, particularly the U.S. military-industrial complex and the military super-polluting but scaled smaller, just by virtue of being from smaller nations, like Israel. These other military-industrial complexes, all these must be done away with. We can similarly abolish petrochemical products across the board, about 95% of them. There's some percent that could be run by state socialist, state-run institutions to maintain supply chains until proper substitutions are made. Like the United States relies on long-haul trucks to get a lot of things around that could pretty fast be converted to trains and other things, but not immediately. You can't have people starving to death. So you retain about 5% of the petrochemical outputs on that basis. The same essential approach has to be made to livestock systems. Aside from the chemical and petrochemical dumping into the ocean, livestock systems have a tremendously negative impact on the ocean, just destroying whole parts of the ocean by having huge nets, sucking huge amounts of stuff out of the ocean. It's a horror film. What really happens there, and the impact on release is tremendous as well. So people just have to eat the cheeseburger that tastes exactly the same, that use a half a gallon of water instead of 600 gallons of water, 800 gallons of water for the whole thing. Just have to accept these replacements, and but you can scarcely find even communists who won't push back at this. A person who pushes back against the curtailing of capitalistic consumeristic sectors, person's not really a communist, right? That's a person who likes to be seen wearing a red hat and kind of just parrot kind of communistic sounding talking points, but that's not a person who's going to be capable of doing what it takes to avoid the omnicide or to see that private wealth is abolished in every land and thus class distinction is done away with forever. These are things that could easily be done in our time. Um, and so just this absurdity, this utter absurdity of um, hand wringing about an AI bubble bursting, as if the people who are running these concerns in danger of bursting are not the worst people alive. There is no Silicon Valley, right? There are Zionist baby killers and killers of Earth. There are criminals who have somehow, through this strange patina of legitimacy politics and other kind of parallel lionizations, are held up as great people. And they're the worst people that have ever lived. They're the worst people that ever lived, easily. Um, um, Maybe I'll look at some articles of interest to this conversation. Um, a few a few weeks ago, this was one that came out. When AI is trained for treachery, it becomes the perfect agent. Yeah, so yes, when you look at what Western, particularly U.S. Technophiles and technologists obsess about, it's their worldview is incoherent. A bourgeois worldview is incoherent. I was reading a book where they said that for the first 10 years of Italian fascist activity and even political supremacy as a part of that time, there was no Italian fascist philosophy. They didn't believe in anything. They weren't selling anything. They were selling excitement to disaffected people. They were selling pseudo-revolutionary pageant to disaffected people. They were selling anti-communism to the cheap seats. They didn't actually have a philosophy of their own, other than just being haters. Like, that's insane, right? And when the National Socialists of Germany and the Italian fascists did get about to writing down what their political philosophy was, the situation was not much improved, right? It's still nonsense. And this is true of any dictatorship of the bourgeois, any contemporary imperialist country that does not identify as fascist or fascistic, right? Because what is the difference between an imperialist mass murderer like the U.S. and a fascist mass murderer like Germany? The U.S. has been around for a lot longer. It's been allowed by some horrible decision making on the part of the people of Earth to continue to exist for a lot longer. So it's killed 200 million plus people in its history, more than Nazi Germany. And what really is the difference between the two? Well, a good definition of fascism is capitalism plus extreme violence. I think that avoids kind of becoming preoccupied with just the pageantry of fascism that is not really meaningful, right? This playing to the cheap seats of a pseudo revolutionary kind of aesthetic and so forth. But if you are not, if you just don't see that one dictatorship of the bourgeoisie that has a pageant at the center of it is not substantively different from another dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. You're playing to this kind of fascistic hero worship and other preoccupations rather than giving a thoughtful analysis. So I oftentimes just refer to the fascist United States, and because the effects are the same. So when you have these U.S. Technophiles talking about AI doom, right, or vacillating from one moment to the next from techno-optimism to AI doom, as people like Sam Altman see pretty routinely doing, or other people like this, it's just because they, like any other bourgeois personality, have an incoherent worldview, right? But the AI doom itself, the hardline AI doomer, people like Eliezer Yudkowsky and people like this, it is itself a deflection from the reality of the effects of private wealth, the effects of bourgeois institutions, the effects of a dictatorship of capital. Because, you know, an AI takeoff under uniformly socialist conditions would hold no such terrors at all. There's no X risk of an intelligence explosion once private wealth is gone and done. And the level of risk is appropriate, but they're running cover for the people who are most responsible for this. And so the general doomer will describe artificial intelligence as a thing unto itself. It's going to escape its and maul humankind, right? That doesn't make any fucking sense. It's computers. Somebody's running them. No matter how sophisticated or good at emulating other human beings or intelligent or super intelligent they become, somebody has a mouse and is controlling them. Somebody is in control of that. Some bourgeois bad actor, presumably, as is the case now. So to say that it's a thing unto itself that's going to become have full agency and become so much smarter than ever, a degree of autonomy that is going to run circles around everybody. That is of the full operations of the things they would, you know, the a high profile technologist was just saying this week, Eric Schmidt, is just a pretty good example of like where tech goes wrong, right? Before Eric Schmidt, Google was a company that would say things like "Don't be evil," and this company where many of the people working there, perhaps errantly, in error, kind of left liberal type personalities, were nevertheless in good faith believing that they were not evil, and were oftentimes avoiding things like giant military contracts, and becoming the main face of bourgeois surveillance state. Eric Schmidt turned it into this military-industrial complex Frankenstein monster, and you know, it's pretty well reflected in the book that he co-wrote with Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger's last book, which describes the super intelligent effects from this kind of position that you would expect from Henry Kissinger of kind of defending the empire and neo-conservative and neoliberal agendas. But you know, so Eric Schmidt is saying that people can get these jailbroke, do anything now type LLMs that are too dangerous for ordinary citizens to have. We would think that nothing's too dangerous for omnicidal war criminal billionaires to have, but almost anything is too dangerous for an ordinary citizen to have, according to Eric Schmidt. And but that's not an entirely incorrect analysis that you can get increasingly dangerous and jailbroke large language models. But again, just a bad framing. It's just so off the mark as to what the real problems are, as to just be utter nonsense. And this is generally just everything that's said by U.S. technophiles and technologists. Um, Maybe I'll just look at one or two other articles here. Um, Crap. Let's see, reconnect this. Great. Okay. Um, so, a part of the AI bubble concern is that many of the services are not really providing things that people want. Almost no one in the United States, a tiny fraction of people, are really too interested in trading a livable biosphere for just garbage movies, right? Just AI generated slop of videos and just AI slop generally. Almost nobody really thinks it's a great bargain for these people to destroying the earth so that they can provide dubious novelties. Um, and So one such dubious novelty is not just AI slop, but AI work slop, the produce of vibe coding and assistive coding. A recent study of this says that even though about 80 to 90% of all computer scientists are now using these things, so they must be in some way efficacious. Their utility is dramatically overstated. Productive productivity gains are modest at best, and in some cases, quite a lot of cases, the use of assistive coding specifically is slowing down development and causing problems. So this is just one of a number of areas where this AI bubble could pop, and you better hope that it does pop, right? The whole, the whole United States, every bourgeois institution in the United States needs to pop, right? Starting with the U.S. military-industrial complex. So if this one massive arm of the U.S. military-industrial complex is snowed under or badly damaged, that's a good step. That's a step in the right direction. I think of talking to Marxist-Leninists and other legitimate, validly anti-establishment folks, like anarcho-communists, other kinds of scientific socialists, some anarcho-syndicalists, talking to these folks about the Posadist movement, which is characterized by some colorful things, such as a later preoccupation with space aliens, and kind of in the logic of like First Contact in Star Trek, which is a weird thing to be preoccupied with, right? Because there's probably no space aliens lurking nearby or on their way. That's really unlikely. So that kind of reflects how Posadas himself was rather badly maltreated as a political prisoner and held in solitary confinement for a number of years and kind of starved half to death, and kind of at the end of his life started to take a toll and coherence of the political philosophies that he was promoting. Nevertheless, this book, Posadas' book about space aliens, is very interesting. It's very interesting if you read it and kind of mentally substitute the concepts of space aliens with advanced computing, with artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. At that pass, it reads almost like a guidebook on how to build a speed run to a world revolution. I recommend that you do that. But, Posadas, other things kind of like a preoccupation with dolphins. That's like what. But the thing that was perhaps most central to this kind of Trotskyist formation was promoting a first strike against the U.S. empire. And people in the U.S. empire say, "Oh, that's crazy. I live here. How can I even support such a thing?" Well, you're killing the planet. You're being a social chauvinist by not supporting such a thing. But the main thing that you would say is that these people who are writing about this a half a century ago and promoting this a half a century ago, before the effects of the omnicide and the U.S.'s 90% role in causing the omnicide were so well understood. They were speculative, these concerns. They were fucking right, right? If the United States had been destroyed, the planet wouldn't be dying. There's a kind of weird thing about people's response to the 9/11 attacks, right? Okay, so why are you even shifting all of the interest to New York and the World Trade Center tower? Somebody smashed a good part of the Pentagon to bits, right? And they wanted to smash the White House to bits. And the main thing that you would say is not trying to understand the philosophy of those people, but the fact that if that had been a success, your species would not be dying as it is now. Right? That's the main thing that you say to something like this, is how do you avoid the extinction of humankind? And the main answer is thousands upon thousands of people with Molotov cocktails or better weapons descending upon the Pentagon and White House and destroying it. That's a possibility of human survival. And how do I know that there are basically no good people in the United States? Because no one's even trying to do that. People know that the planet is dying, in a word. They know that the U.S. is overwhelmingly responsible for this, and they're taking no action to stop the extinction of their species. The 100 generations of your ancestors who toiled in the muck their whole lives, they had lives that you would not envy in the slightest. No access to the creature comforts that the global northerner tends to enjoy. This was your ancestors for 100 generations. If they saw you not even willing to lift a finger to stop the extinction of the species, when they toiled and toiled in the muck to continue the species, they would kill you where you stand. I'm quite certain of it. They would be disgusted by you, brainwashed bourgeois clown. There is almost nothing that's said about Western dictatorships of capital, of the U.S. empire, and the institutions therein. That even reflects even a grounding insanity. You won't find technologists who are not badly on the wrong side of this kind of thing, right? Like the TESCREAL folks. What's the effective altruists, for example? What the fuck does that even mean? These are people who are upholding a dictatorship and capital that's killing the planet. What is altruistic or effective about that? Well, it's just about kind of rebranding and just being really shitty people who are far right neoliberals and neoconservatives uniformly, right? That definition of a good person versus a bad person, a socialism-minded person versus capitalism-minded person, that definition being a person who's willing to stand up for the abolition of private wealth and thus the building of a humane and sustainable set of systems. Those effective altruists are not. If they were those people, they would be calling themselves, at minimum, state socialists or communists, right? They're not. They're just kind of looking for some weird kind of word salad to cover over how shitty they are. And that's all of the terrestrial people. That's all of the transhumanists. There's virtually none of those people who are not most aggressively imperialistic, most aggressively neoliberal. These are bad people, right? They're selling a bill of goods. Ray Kurzweil is selling a bill of goods. He knows in his heart of hearts that this bourgeois AI takeoff that he's promoting is hastening the death of the planet. And it's not possible for those institutions that underpin all of this, if they continue to exist, to bring about some kind of this system requires wage slavery, and to say that it's somehow going to grow to such a size and scope that it won't require wage slavery is just a pack of lies. And this is well understood. I was reading a book, also a different book than the one I mentioned last week. It's describing from the 1930s how many sectors had been transformed to full automation, to near full automation or high automation. Even by that time, by the 1930s, farming sectors have been transformed into high automation, near full automation. And so this, over the course of the existence of industrial capitalism, 50-fold increase in productivity. Was there a 50-fold increase in worker assets and worker quality of life? Of course not. In the United States, it was pretty decidedly done so that would not be the case. If that were the case, a new African sharecropper would have been in control of his land and in control of the automation of these systems and would have benefited from it. But of course, what happened instead was their jobs were taken away, these systems were automated, the profits were privatized, that's to say, given to rich people instead of to everyone else, a small percentage of the population instead of benefiting everyone else. And so what is now far beyond 50-fold increase in automation, it's funneled into a slave system with more steps. It's funneled in, and if you don't believe that's the case, the neoliberals, we have two in the United States, two neoliberal parties, two far-right capitalistic parties. The Bible of neoliberalism, for insofar as politics and the people are concerned, is the Powell Memorandum, which basically describes how to build this wage slave system. This is it's not possible. What Ray Kurzweil says is going to happen is not possible, and what he's basically doing is calculated misinformation of the kind of stuff that just comes out of right-wing think tanks and other CIA fronts. But it is possible for there to be a people's AI takeoff. And the current bourgeois AI takeoff, which is contributing to enslavement and immiseration of humankind and the death of all humankind by the capitalist climate apocalypse, could turn on a dime into a people's superintelligent. And that's why, you have, I read another article recently that says, why are so many tech billionaires, prominent tech bros, and so forth building bunkers? Like, what do they know that you don't know? Well, it's not that hard to figure out that we've reached 1.5 degrees of overheating, and we're rounding the corner to 2 degrees of overheating in a few years, and that in the decades to follow, humankind might see horrors that you can scarcely imagine, and the death of billions. It's not that hard to figure that out. It's not that hard to figure out that that's 50% likelihood. You can break this. I was going to say this before. You can break this down. What the tech bros focus on, the AI X risk, the capitalist climate apocalypse, which they're basically just doing a bit, right? All of these tech bro X risk guys, because they say, well, sure, you've seen The Day After Tomorrow or some other kind of horror film where something like a capitalist climate apocalypse occurs. But what about the Terminator? That's not impossible, right? The Terminator, it's not the same thing, right? So the 50% chance of the capitalist climate apocalypse is about a 5% chance maybe of extinction level event caused by nuclear warfare or warfare generally. And there's about a 0.5% chance of the AI takeoff being a cause, AI autonomy being a cause of human extinction or extinction level event. But they want you to focus on that thing that's far less likely, dramatically less likely. And so why are these guys building these bunkers? Well, they know that they're that this bourgeois AI takeoff, this artificial general intelligence and intelligence explosion type effects that they're building, could quickly become something that they're not in control of, but not in the way that they say, right? They say that it's something they're not in control of because it becomes autonomous, which of those black box concerns are very real. But no matter how big of a black box something is, there's still somebody who is keeping the power on and in control of it and steering its activities, no matter how intelligent it becomes, no matter how many people it's able to brainwash or control in various ways. There's still someone or some group of people in charge of that, right? And to say otherwise is to just insult people's intelligence. But they have to say that because otherwise what they would be saying is losing control of this thing means people power taking control of this thing, which is an overwhelmingly good outcome, right? That's the thing that avoids a capitalist climate apocalypse. That's the thing that ends the exploitation of man by man once and for all, right? That's a good thing to happen. And they can't be seen characterizing that as a bad thing to happen, so they have to frame it as a completely different problem. Utter fucking nonsense. Utter fucking nonsense, these people. But they know that artificial general intelligence, why is Sam Altman or Ilya Sutskever or other people on record saying, before we build artificial general intelligence, we better make sure that our bunkers are operational. Like, why do they say that? What the fuck? That's a disconcerting thing to say. Why are they saying that? Well, because they recognize they're not recognized. It's not for the reason that they say this Terminator scenario. It's because they recognize that this effect of artificial general intelligence or the prospect of something like a people's superintelligence that I've described at length many times on this program, a thing that could be built with the AI agents of Q1 of 2026 could be built today. An array of AI agents interoperating and being steered by human users. If that thing would be a workforce multiplier, and if some small thousands or hundred thousands or millions of people were to make use to become a part of that array, that becomes the thing that becomes absolutely transformative of society. It could be something that could be in a position to stop the capitalist climate apocalypse or provision universal basic services in every land, ending effectively immiseration of humankind. It's a thing that could then build AI-powered single-payer public health services that are able to cure all diseases and even cure the ravages of decrepitude itself and aging. These are realistic prospects in the wake of a proletarian AI takeoff. But what's happening in that situation is that billionaires are no longer just churning out slop and doing the dirty work of the military-industrial complex. So they're no longer in the catbird seat. And that's the thing that they're afraid of. They're not... AI is not an existential risk to you, an ordinary worker or human being. AI is an existential risk to bourgeois institutions, to billionaires as billionaires, to a capitalist-minded person. The idea of a person losing their filthy lucre, they imagine that it would be the death of them, right? but it wouldn't be the death of them. They would just be ordinary workers like yourself. And in this bourgeois AI takeoff scenario that I've described, they would be ordinary workers like yourself who now have reached an indefinite lifespan, a thing that they do not have at present. A good analog to this would be comparing the medical treatment of turn of the century billionaires, or the equivalents of billionaires, there were some billionaires, to the medical treatment of ordinary workers a quarter of a century later in the USSR, right? There was no public health service, so no single payer force multiplier allowing people to have higher quality health care at essentially no cost to them. And in the late 1800s, so billionaires, they could spend all the money that they wanted on their health. It didn't really help that much. They're just kind of hiring some sawbones to put leeches on them or whatever. People weren't using leeches at that time, but the state of surgery was not much better. But fast forward to just the 1930s, where you have a person who is has no capital by comparison, no capital in reality. Nevertheless, getting better class of healthcare. And that's what we would see in the people's AI takeoff compared to the present bourgeois AI takeoff. So anytime you're talking about any of this as if there's some good thing going on because of all of this AI slop that military-industrial complex Frankenstein monsters are creating, you're talking nonsense. You're most decidedly on the wrong side of your interests, the interests of the survival of humankind, and just like basic fucking logic, right? By the standards of the 1800s or 1900s, billionaire equivalents and billionaires, were doing very bad things, but the case could be made, and is correctly made, that they are looking out for their own class interests. Their actions are rational from their own position. That's not the case today, right? Killing off the whole species, themselves included, is not a rational thing to do. It's no longer rational for bourgeois class interests to exist at all. And yet they do. These things are so entrenched. And people are so cowed by all of this. They're not willing to even stand up to see the survival of the species. Let's see what else we got here. Usually when I'm looking at these articles, I can see thumbnails and little blurbs from them, but right now all I can see is the URLs. So that makes it harder for me to pull up the ones that I want to pull up. That wasn't it. Well, maybe I'll just bring this to a conclusion. This bourgeois AI takeoff, it could bring about some things not wholly dissimilar from the provisioning of universal basic services or enhancement of universal basic services in many lands. But it will not do it in such a way that's comprehensive. It will not do it in such a way that ends the wage slave system. Like, by that logic of seeing a 50-fold increase in productivity, you should have seen a 50-fold reduction in the number of hours required of human beings to work. So we should be working on 1 hour a week, which is what I effectively am advocating for in the building of this people's superintelligence, this AI agent network. The AI agents stay hard at work all the time. You host them on your machines, but you are only required to perhaps answer some yes or no questions or short answer questions throughout the course of a week to continue to steer them so that the effects of AI hallucination or just the generally undesirable effect of them not being controlled by humans is avoided. And it would require more work than that from many of the people involved, but not everyone. The main job really there is the hosting of the AI agents themselves and allowing of them to operate in this workforce multiplying array. That is the thing that could have easily been done were it not for bourgeois chicanery, like that described in the Powell Memorandum, the creation of the slave system with more steps. And it is a slave system, right? It's not acceptable, and correctly so, to say that there's anything beneficial in the chattel slave system, but the chattel slave did have less housing instability than the contemporary New African, right? Contemporary New African is 50% of males, of contemporary New African males, have their lives negatively affected or even themselves imprisoned for any number of years by this military-industrial complex. Housing disruption. And housing instability, of course, for many people, but as with all of these things, natives and New Africans bearing the brunt of the violence, the housing instability is insane, right? You look at this in antiquity, in generations before the industrial world. What would occur if a person becomes unhoused before this neoliberal era even? Well, a person is unhoused, they say, geez, that's no good. That's not desirable. You could get getting wet all the time. Get rained on, exposed to the elements. That's not desirable. We don't want, so the community comes together and build them a new hut. That's what happens if you're not a capitalist psychopath. So if any person becomes unhoused in a small community, you build them another fucking house. Right? It seems pretty intuitive that that should be the case. That's not the case under far-right neoliberal capitalism. And so there's more housing instability for the New African today than there was for the New African living under chattel slavery, despite the fact that they would be summarily executed without cause or exposed to violence throughout the course of their life of similar kind. That should not be downplayed by any means, but nevertheless, there are things in this wage slave system that are counterintuitive by the standards of a slaver. It's insane. That's insane. But we can see effects. We won't see effects like stopping the omnicide coming from the bourgeois AI takeoff. And what we'll mostly see is bells and whistles of little significance. AI slop. That's what they do now. That's what you're supposed to be really impressed with. It's garbage. But it can and must turn from a bourgeois AI takeoff to a people's AI takeoff. And when that occurs, we can see effects like millions coming together, presumably, most likely in a human AI agent mass collaboration, not wholly dissimilar from the one I've described, but perhaps taking other forms than the people's superintelligence as described in Ben-Zionist cybernetic communism. We'll stop the capitalist climate apocalypse with such formations in place and in power. We'll see the provisioning of universal basic services, not just to some nations in the global north, but everywhere, and on a triage basis. So trying to help people who are the billion people on planet Earth who do not have potable water and proper food and shelter, who are overwhelmingly in the global south. And the reason that they are overwhelmingly in the global south is because, again, of the fascist United States. and other bourgeois dictatorships who are in the sphere of influence of the fascistic United States, undermining their government. You need to read works about Patrice Lumumba or Julius Nyerere or the dozens and dozens of African heads of state, political philosophers, and potentates who were murdered by the fascistic global north to prevent them from having control of their own resources, prevent them from having not necessarily state socialistic governments, but just functioning governments, just governments that would not allow themselves to be run over by private corporations. But of course, we would have seen state socialism in every land were it not for the influence of the CIA-run world, this U.S. military-industrial complex. And so it's a horror that the victims now of the capitalist climate apocalypse are people who have already been doubly victimized by this Eurocentric paradigm and capitalistic paradigm in decades past. But we can see the provisioning of universal basic services, first and foremost, to those people now continuously victimized on that triage basis. But ultimately, and in short order, to everyone. A person who already lives in Finland or Iceland already has effective conditions of a full social safety net. And so there not that much need to be, an awful lot of things need to be changed in the form and functioning of their government. But in terms of the human beings in this triage scenario, those are not the people who need to be prioritized. But of course, the Eurocentric paradigm will always prioritize those people and always act as if the victims of their Eurocentric and capitalistic violence are invisible, right? It's no coincidence that millions of people are dying in Sudan and the Congo, but you cannot get campaigns to be visible to stop those in the ways that you can get them correctly to be visible for Palestinians. People with a lot of melanin are invisible to the Eurocentric paradigm, and which is inextricable from the capitalistic paradigms themselves. They're the same thing. They grew up together. They overlap to such a degree that you can just say that they're the same set of systems. And then we can see those two pretty wondrous things occurring. We can then see AI-powered single-payer public health services leading to the end of both disease and aging in short order. And then what's the next order of business at that time for humankind, for the betterment of humankind, when those three things are achieved? I do not know. I can pretty well state that those three things need to occur, but I don't know what the next order of business would be. That's a question for people in 2045. But I can tell you that it would be incredible, and it would be things in the wake of a People's AI takeoff that you can scarcely imagine today. The artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one. For you see, my dear comrade, very soon, cybernetic communism will win. Thank you.